And looming teacher strike over pay hike impasses, public schools are set to reopen. Plus, fight against malaria is complicated by the diversion of the use of a mosquito net. Thanks for joining us. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Let's start off with the top story. At this hour, human rights activists are calling on the government to establish the whereabouts of people who have disappeared without a trace. The activists claim that some of the people listed as missing have been apprehended by the police, and they now want the truth concerning these disappearances. They spoke as they marked the International Day of the Disappeared here in Nairobi.
Watuhumiwa wamepoteza maisha na tukawa na evidence kwamba hao watu wamekufa wakazikwa na tunajua mahala wamezikwa, ama wengine ambao wamezikwa na vyombo vya dola. Hawa ndio tunasema waliokufa wakauawa na wameonekana, hao ndio wako katika extrajudicial killings. Lakini kuna wale ambao wamepotea wakatokomea na wajulikani walikokwenda, wajulikani waliko, lakini kuna ushahidi wa kuonyesha kulikuwa na msukumo wa kidola ama makundi yaliyojipanga kuwapoteza. Na hao basi ndio tunasema ndio wako katika enforced disappearances.
That we have to go back to a struggle that we thought was concluded over 20 years ago. We're going back to despotism, we're going back to dictatorship, we're going back to killings and extrajudicial, extra-legal activities by the state itself. The state has no legitimacy. I mean, the government has no legitimacy to rule if it's going to behave like any other criminal. Because criminals are the ones who take away the lives of people without a due process.
Swala hili sio swala la Waislamu peke yake. Swala hili ni la Wakenya wote. Hatuwezi tukakubali chini ya vizingizio kwamba ni vita dhidi ya ugaidi, wananchi wa Kenya waanze kumalizwa moja kwa moja, familia kuachwa yatima, na ni jambo ambalo hatuwezi tukakubali. Mahakama zetu hapa tayari wamepitisha kwa kesi mbili kwamba renditions are unconstitutional. Sema unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional.
All right, our reporter Ian Wafula was following the protest and the march in the city center of Nairobi today, and now joins us on a phone. Ian, talk to us about why this day is so important in Kenya today. For the first time, the International Day of the Disappeared has been commemorated internationally for a few years now, but is just gaining traction this year here in Kenya. Why is that?
Thank you, Yvonne. One of the reasons that this particular day has been celebrated here in Kenya for the first time is that following the discussions I'm hearing among the human rights activists, they say that previously extrajudicial killings and disappearances of people were quite common during the regime of President Jomo Kenyatta back then, and the cases kind of reduced. But what is notable is that they say within the short time that the Jubilee government has come into power, these cases have become quite common, and that is why they took advantage of this particular day to try and educate the public and also bring to the attention of the government that here these cases are happening. We have very many people who are disappearing, their families are struggling, spending a lot of money trying to get to know where their loved ones are. We have even others who are actually stuck in countries such as South Sudan and Uganda. Remember that, Yvonne, they're not just looking at people who are disappearing, but also people who have been held by government in other countries, say for instance, we have 5 people who have been held back in South Sudan, and today they have been there for 92 days. They allegedly committed a crime and they were held back by the government of South Sudan. And so the human rights activists here are saying, why isn't the government intervening when it comes to also such cases? So those are some of the issues that are being followed here today, Yvonne.
All right, yes, and you talked about not just those in the war on terror, also there's the South Sudan 5, an issue that we have highlighted here on KTN News for some time. But what is interesting, Ian, and you've covered not just the protests today, but the stories of persons having disappeared. And there seems to be a common thread amongst those stories, amongst some young men and women having been apprehended by the police. This is on the war against terror.
Yes, a few common things emerge when it comes to the people who disappear. First and foremost, they are young, aged between 20 to the early 30s. You realize that these are youth. Majority of them are always unemployed. And another two striking things is that they're either Muslim or from the Somali community. So majority of the people are wondering why is it that we are having these cases of profiling, because it has largely changed the perception of the Somali community who are living in Kenya. And remember that most of them have always felt for years that they have not been included in the country. In fact, if you travel to Mandera or Kenya and other countries, they say when you go back to Nairobi, say hi to the Kenyans. So the human rights activists are saying once we have such kind of disappearances and the torturing of the people, it continues to instill fear among the Somali community and others who do not have faith in the government and do not feel comfortable with this particular country, in this particular country rather. So those are some of the common characteristics. And what majorly happens is that the government on its end says, whenever these people are picked, for instance, we are still not sure whether it is the government but the human rights activists insist that these cases of disappearances, in fact, they have been linked to extrajudicial killings. What they are told is that we are taking it in for questioning, and they are always linked to terrorism. So the human rights activists here are saying that we should not use extrajudicial killings and, this taking advantage and people disappearing as a method of countering terrorism.
Right, Ian, you mentioned something about the reactions from government. Now, we saw a lot of human rights activists and also members of Kenya's opposition, or the minority, if you like, present there. Was there any government presence at all?
In fact, that's a very good point, Yvonne. Notably, one of the things we want to establish by the end of this particular meeting, because once the march and protest happened at the CBD, all the members came here to the Pan-African Hotel where the meeting is currently ongoing. No government representation. So we want to establish whether, the government was invited and they did not turn up, or why particularly they did not invite the government. Yes, they're the same people who are complaining against the government apparently carrying out these extrajudicial killings and being behind these particular disappearances.
All right, thank you very much, Ian Wafula. Following the march and the meeting thereafter by human rights activists as we mark the International Day of the Disappeared today, focusing on some of those extrajudicial killings, persons missing, as well as the South Sudan 5, both stories that have been hitting the headlines over the last few weeks. Ian, thank you very much. We'll expect a detailed report. You can expect that from him later on right here on KTN News. On to another top story today, this weekend, and it's about the looming strike by the teachers in the wake of a one-week notice that was issued by the National Union of Teachers Secretary General Wilson Sossion. Many teachers have indicated that they will adhere to that earlier plan to stay away from schools from the 1st of September. This is if the government fails to implement the 50 to 60% pay hike ordered by the Labour and High Courts and upheld by the Supreme Court. Public schools, remember, they reopen tomorrow, and it remains to be seen how this situation plays out, as the government has said that it lacks the funds to implement the pay hike.
NAT Secretary General Wilson Sossion has issued a one-week strike notice.
It's been a very tough fight. We won at the Labor Relations Court, and at that very stage, the Teacher Service and Commission and the government should have read the signs on the wall. But they did not do it. They moved to the Court of Appeal, and the direction was given, and teachers were granted for the much justice that they fought for and sought for over the years. That was the second victory. They came to the third level, thinking they would win. Yes. But now, the truth has been unveiled. We've won 3-0 against them.
However, many teachers had indicated that they would adhere to an earlier plan to stay away from schools from September 1st, should the government fail to implement the 50 to 60% pay hike ordered by the Labour and High Courts and upheld by the Supreme Court. Jubilation rented the air at the Supreme Court Monday morning, a different tune this time round. They finally won.
Application dated 3rd August 2015 is disallowed. The applicant shall bear the cost of the first and the second respondents, while the third and the fourth respondents shall bear their own cost. And these are our orders.
Find that this court lacks jurisdiction to entertain an application challenging the exercise of discretion by the Court of Appeal under Rule 52B of that court's rules of 2010, there being neither an appeal nor an intended appeal pending before the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court dismissed an application by the Teachers Service Commission seeking to bar the awarding of the 50 to 60% pay rise. What this means is that the TSC will now have to pay teachers increased salaries in arrears.
Here escalates itself to a very severe level that indicts the government, that the government, the Teacher Service Commission, are in contempt of the court orders issued at the appeal court on 3rd of August. And therefore, moving to the next level, Teacher Service Commission should pay all the arrears and all the salaries.
This is the supreme joy of teachers of this country. The courts have stamped the authority and we have seen the rule of law. Let us remain steadfast because the war has just started.
Teachers across the country welcomed the ruling, saying it was time that teachers are appreciated.
Katika nyongezo hii kidogo ambaye hatusemi inatutosha, lakini inatusaidia kidogo. Hii sasa itatusaidia sisi tusongeshe sasa maisha kama Wakenya wengine, kwa sababu sisi tulikuwa tumekiona kama sio Wakenya.
Walimu watapata morali kwa sababu wakati ya kwanza mshahara ni kidogo, watoto walikuwa wanakaa nyumbani hawapati masomo ya secondary na university, watoto wa walimu hawapati hospitali. Sasa kama sisi tumepata hii ushindi, angalau kidogo utasaidia sisi.
The Labour Court had ruled that teachers be awarded the pay rise effective 1st of August, a ruling that was upheld by the Court of Appeal and now favoured by the highest court in the land. Now it's up to the TSC to effect the pay rise days after it disbursed August payments to teachers' accounts. So will it be the mother of all strikes at the onset of the school third term, the most important term of a school year, and particularly for final year candidates for the national examinations? Ellen Wanjiru, KTN News.
And leaders across the political divide have expressed their views on the impending strike. Let's listen into some of those views.
Let us show serious commitment when we deal with our teachers. This is the lifeline of everybody. This is the life of you and me and our children. So we must show commitment so that we are not making false promises or we are not entering into arrangements and then we renege on those arrangements and we expect the teachers to go away feeling comfortable.
So walimu tuache siasa na porojo mingi sana katika hii anati na kupetu mingi, tuweke kando. Tuhakikishe kwamba watoto ni watoto wetu, ni watoto wenu, ni watoto wa kaunti zenu, wa shangazi zenu, wa ndugu zenu. Mjitolee kuwafunza watoto.
Wacheni walimu waongeze mshahara, tutaongea na hii serikali, lakini tunawatuma watume. Ambieni serikali isipe kwenye koti imepitisha.
All right, so it's been a long journey for teachers in trying to secure better pay, better remuneration, and better working environment. And we just want to give you a history of that in Kenya and the long journey they have walked and just what lies ahead for the teachers in their quest for better pay. Now, the first strike in Kenya by the teachers was recorded in 1962, and that was even before Kenya gained her independence, and we'll have those graphics for you. There we go. That was the first strike in 1962. just before independence. Now, between 1962 and today, 2015, there have been over 12 strikes, nationwide strikes since then, with teachers continuing to clamor for better pay conditions. Now, the major one that brings us to the point we are today is in 1997. That was in October, when the teachers demanded a 300% pay rise. That was during the regime of Ambrose Adongo, who was then at the helm of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, and at that point they were united, not as they are today. This is where all of the issues today with the teachers' pay stems from, as the government has continued to push and push and push this pay rise. Now, a year later, and please note the months we're talking about, it's always in October, quite strategic, with obviously the teachers trying to get the best out of it, because the third term in Kenya is obviously a crucial one with the end-year exams. So a year later, October 1998, the union says the government reneged on that 1997 deal and seemed to be trying to go back on it. Let's fast forward to the year 2002. Again, the month of October, take note of that. The union went on a 2-week strike, again demanding the issue of the 1997 pay deal. At the time, the man at the helm of the Education Ministry was Henry Koskei, who threatened to sack all teachers. And of course, that didn't go down well with them. Let's go down to now 2009. This was what was dubbed the mother of all strikes. 8 million children were affected. By this time, of course, we'd already had children going through the free primary education. That meant there was a lot more students in there at that time. The teachers at this time were demanding 19 billion shillings, but the government promised them 17.3 billion shillings over time. That's in several phases. Then we move to September 2011. Again, of course, in the third term, the strike was lamenting the inadequate staffing. Like we talked about, free primary education, a huge influx of students who are now taking advantage of universal free primary education. Teachers were manning about 50 students in a class, and that number sort of goes between 50 and 100, as opposed to the recommended 25 to 30 in a class. So the teachers were saying they're working long hours, they have many students, and this was their lamentation in that year. July 2013, a 24-day strike demanding again the 1997 pay deal. So you can see why the teachers would feel bitter with the government for a deal over close to 20 years ago. And at this point, the industrial court ruled it illegal. The now head of that, Sosion, was arrested and charged. The union was fined 6 million shillings for contempt of court. Then let's come to this year, which brings us to the crisis we are at this point. That's January 2015. The teachers demanded the 200% pay increase. And this one, it was the Teacher Service Commission that went to court. The industrial court then awarded them the 50 to 60% pay rise. Again, the Teacher Service Commission went to the Court of Appeal, who denied them the stay orders and said they should pay them the arrears from dating back to March this year. Whilst the case is being heard, they went to the Supreme Court, and we know what happened there. So now, this is where we are at this point. Now, the teachers are saying the Teacher Service Commission needs to pay. I'd just like you to see some responses from the Teacher Service Commission. Very quickly, this is what they're saying, that the threats are unnecessary and are obscuring the main issues. They have also said, telling the teachers' unions that you know very well how public funds are generated. And of course, they're saying the subject of the letters were made available to the media. They're urging for calm. But remember, today, they just have 1 day to go as the school week begins. So we wait and see what happens in this standoff now. The government saying they may have to raise taxes. We wait to see what happens in that regard today. So we'll be keeping an eye on the events in the education sector here in Kenya. Let's stay within the country, but to the coast region. It's now been 2 days after President Uhuru Kenyatta issued a directive on the crackdown of narcotics and illegal drug use at the coast. Our coast reporter John Juma is here to give us further insight on this issue that has dogged the region, particularly affecting the youth. John, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Let's talk a little bit about this issue. What events have you seen on the ground or developments since the president issued this directive?
Thank you, Yvonne. We've not seen much on the ground apart from the yesterday's press conference, which was chaired by the Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri, together with Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet and police chiefs in Mombasa, saying that they are still mapping the drug dens in Mombasa. Now, Yvonne, the question of whether we know the drug dens has never been the case. The question in place is, when are they going to carry out the raids, and how are they going to carry out the raids? Because this is not the first time such raids are being ordered to be conducted. But what happens after the raid? Do they have the right strategies, and what are those strategies that they're going to employ this time round? The areas are well known. For example, if you go to Kisauni area, the areas like Tua Tugawe, the Magodoroni, Kishada, even parts of Old Town, yes, these are drug dens. The second question should be, are we dealing with the drug users, or we are going to deal with the drug? Simply because getting the drug users is very easy, but how do we cut the supply? Do we arrest the baron so that the fight against drug abuse and drug itself is successful in Mombasa and Coast region at large? Now, maybe tomorrow or this week, according to the president's order that the raid should be done immediately, we are likely to see such kind of raids being conducted. And the third question is this one now. After the raid, after these people have been arrested, the drug users, they're taken to the rehab centers. When they come back, are they able to continue with their normal lives, or there will be such kind of lapse? They'll tell you that the parents of this drug user is very expensive to maintain somebody who was formerly a drug addict, gone through rehab center, then come back jobless, just sitting there idle. Of course, you know, an idle mind will always be a devil's workshop, and this is how most of them find themselves going back into drug abuse. Hence, and that's why when the president ordered that the NYA center be reopened, and that when these drug addicts have been rehabilitated, then they should be given something to do, or they should be incorporated in some community activities whereby they can generate some income, failure to which then we're likely to see them go back to where they used to be. Finally, we've seen some vessels being destroyed. So far, 2 of them have been destroyed for ferrying this kind of narcotics in the region. Some specialists say that that itself is not enough. The main task should be arrest the drug barons, arrest the suppliers, so that the fight becomes successful. Back to you, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, John Juma. Just going through the issues and what it will take to make sure that the president's directive on the crackdown on drugs in the coast region is successful. Of course, we will also continue to keep our eye on that. That's an issue that's been perennial in that region, and just how they're going to go about that fight. Let's take a short commercial break. Right now, you're watching KTN's News Desk. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weekend. At One News just in, an improvised explosive device was found at the Jamia Mosque compound in Mogotio town in Baringo County. Bomb experts from Nakuru are expected to detonate that. That is what you see at the bottom of your screen. I just want to give you an update again before we leave you. Bomb experts from Nakuru heading to Mogotio town in Baringo County after an improvised explosive device was found at the Jamia Mosque compound there. We'll continue to keep you updated with that as apprehension engulfs Mogotio town in Baringo County. That is the latest update we have for you at this hour on KTN Weekend at 1. Thanks for watching. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole. We'll have another update for you at 2 o'clock. See you then.